Chapter 7. Home at Last. At the Darling home, Mr. and Mrs. Darling and Nana are desolate. They always think about Wendy, John and Michael. They look at the 3 empty beds and tears come to their eyes. Mr. and Mrs. Darling never smile or laugh any more. Mrs. Darling sits in the silent nursery and cries. She thinks of her children, their games, and their happy voices. Nana tries to comfort her, but nothing can make Mrs. Darling happy. One night, after several months, something incredible happens. Wendy, John, and Michael fly into the nursery. Mrs. Darling is sitting near the fireplace.
Mother, we're home,
says Wendy. Mrs. Darling turns around and sees her 3 dear children. Is this true, or is it a dream? I can't believe it, she says.
Oh, Mother, we are home at last,
the children say. Wendy, John and Michael embrace their mother and kiss her. How wonderful to see you, my dear children! How wonderful to hear your sweet voices! Oh, let me look at you! She calls Mr. Darling. Mr. Darling is very happy and surprised. There is great joy in the Darling nursery tonight.
Mother,
says Wendy,
Peter Pan and the Lost Boys are here too. They are waiting outside.
The 6 lost boys slowly enter the nursery. They look at Mrs. Darling and smile at her.
Mother, these are the lost boys. They haven't got a mother. Can they stay with us?
Says Wendy. What dear little boys, says Mrs. Darling. Of course they can stay with us. And where is Peter Pan? Peter enters the nursery and says,
I am here, but I don't want to stay here. I don't want to go to school, and I don't want to grow up. I want to be a young boy forever. I must return to Neverland. I am happy with the Indians and the fairies.
Wendy is surprised and says,
But Peter, when will I see you again?
Mrs. Darling says, I have an idea, Wendy. You can visit Peter in Neverland every spring. You can stay there for a week.
Can I really go to Neverland every spring, Mother?
Asks Wendy. Peter looks at Mrs. Darling and asks,
Is that a promise?
Of course it is, says Mrs. Darling.
Then I want spring to come quickly,
says Peter.
Yes, very quickly,
says Wendy.
Come on, Tink. Let's fly home and wait for spring,
says Peter. Peter Pan and Tinker Bell fly out of the nursery window into the night sky. Their destination? Neverland.